feasibility request just one big number. Get well,
But that's you are speaking about cancer trials, is it?
yes.
Hi guys,
Hi everyone.
Hello.
can you hear us? Can you hear us well?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, Happy New Year, everyone. Yeah, so we are at UCommune office. So maybe you can say something, then I will present what we discussed with Zilesh the other day.
Happy New Year, everyone. Okay, so today's meeting is actually a very important meeting. And that's the reason why we are having it this time of the day. Now, as you're all aware, one of the key things and one of the key things that we are trying to move towards very quickly over the next few months is critical revenue, right? And um, delivering that critical revenue, it requires us to plug our business into some sort of revenue generating framework, which today is not very clear. One thing that we kind of are shaping towards that direction is to design what we call a feasibility marketplace product, where at the center of everything rests OncoShot's trial matching algorithm. So this trial matching algorithm that can connect patient data with right trials, it is up a very powerful tool, but that tool today it's very hard to monetize by itself. And my impression of this evolution is that we'll be able to eventually build different suites of solutions on top of this core trial matching technology that addresses the needs of, say, pharma, hospitals, genomic service providers for their own specific purposes. And that's where we will derive the greatest value, when we can solve the problem for each of these stakeholders with the trial matching technology in its core. So now specifically talking about the feasibility marketplace, the idea is very simple. Today, the way pharma tries to find trials or the appropriate trial sites is really based on legacy data. When they want to actually go through that process of understanding whether a trial site is ready to start a trial, they can never leverage on real-time information about whether there are suitable patients. Now, OncoShot is already working with cancer hospitals in Singapore to get data in that respect. And what we are trying to do with this feasibility marketplace is to essentially create what we call a two-sided marketplace. Where on one side, we have hospitals, which are putting data on our OncoShot system. And on the other side, you have pharma, CROs, and biotech who are all looking for opportunities for their molecules or for their trials, but they don't know where the right partners and where the right patients. Now, we use Singapore as a pilot where we can secure the hospitals first, quickly get the pharma partners and the biotech partners. But the idea is that once this feasibility solution works, we need to kind of scale this up across much larger number of participants on the sponsor side and also on the side. And that's where we think that, at least from this feasibility product, we can achieve good growth and revenue from. And that's just one product, right? But I think this is a need that we know the hospitals have, and we know that the sponsors have. And what Ruslan will be showing you is actually how we are visualizing this solution. And the concept behind this is that at the end of the day, you have a solution that is what we call a SaaS solution. SaaS is software as a service. By building a solution in this manner, you can actually obtain metrics such as, for example, how many people are participating in this ecosystem, how many people retain, how many people leave, what is the recurring revenue, and we can actually potentially build a scalable business out of this SaaS model software, right? With typical SaaS model kind of business frameworks attached to it. So I think that's the idea, and Ruslan is going to share at least some mock-ups so that everyone can get a sense of what the envision of the product. And after we're done with that, I want to get everyone's thought, particularly Neil's thoughts on how you see this evolving, what it can work like. What you need to keep in mind is this is like the very basic mock-up. In fact, I had actually sent off a set of slides to Ruslan, and I was expecting that we would be doing a lot more discussions about how the product is envisioned. But our designers were able to take that and very quickly build mock-ups, which were actually quite impressive. Right? So I think we're moving a bit faster than we anticipated. Today's call is to make sure that we get some feedback and for everyone to understand what is happening. Now, beyond this, of course, there's going to be a lot of work that Kara and Fonsel, Meehan will all be involved in trying to shape how we approach our hospitals and our sponsors to try selling them the product before they get actually put it. What goes into the assets that we need to create to make those sales and to get this commercialization. The idea that we can deliver the product at the end of 3 months and actually start generating revenue. Oh, stop it.
Any questions so far?
I have one question. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yurin, you said that the clinical trial matching tool by itself is difficult to monetize. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Probably there's some experiences that you are having in the past few months. You can also share them with us.
Yeah, so the initial intent of the clinical trials matching tool is that it kind of lends itself to a more efficient screening and enrollment process, right? But it's just going to be very difficult to show that we are building that funnel and to show that end metric that the funnel has improved efficiency or the numbers. It's just the revenue cycle is just way too long. So that's the reason why we're trying to bring that revenue cycle forward to the feasibility phase, where just the exchange of data for feasibility alone can allow us to monetize faster. Right? We don't actually have to wait for conversion and wait over a period of time to show that the screening and enrollment rates have improved, and then eventually to monetize from that. Discussions are also very complex potentially if you're going to go down the route of screening and enrollment alone, where we tell the hospitals, use our product, you can screen and you can enroll, because I think the clinical trial models in which CROs are charging sponsors, the pharmaceuticals, lends itself to a lot of complexity. If our only revenue opportunity is to go to them and say that when we use the system, we will charge you X dollars of money for every patient because the hospital is using this trial matching tool. I think that those discussions are just going to be very complex. So what you will realize is that the hospitals will be happy to use the tool, but the CROs will just not want to pay because they will want to be shown some proof over time, and they will eventually want to move that discussion of payment to the farmer, and that lends itself to a lot of obstacles, which I don't think it's a good idea for us to depend on solely as our source of revenue at this point. If we can build on the feasibility at marketplace as an initial revenue generating system, then I think it lends itself to the opportunity to say, look, you're paying us for feasibility, you're using our system. Now, how can we work in a deeper level for the patients to eventually get screened and then finally enrolled? So that becomes a natural continuation. So that's something that has kind of hit me in our revenue discussions.
So I can comment quickly on that. So feasibility product, what we are going to discuss, what we are discussing now, is the transaction between CRO or pharma and the trial site, which is a hospital. So it's a common transaction, and then they have incentive and value from the both sides. Without that, with what we have now, there is no incentive, for example, for a trial site to push data onto the platform. So, for example, if trial site pushes a lot of data and then this data becomes valuable for CRO or pharma, and they can leverage on this data. But then for hospital, there is no reason to update this data or to push this data because there is no common transaction. So these two parties, they are not transacting directly. So in the middle, OncoShot. But with this feasibility, there is a common transaction and it's a so-called unit economy. So it's much easier to model it. What's the incentive of using it for trial site and what's the incentive for using it from pharma or CRO side. So that's the main difference which we would like to achieve.
Yuren, are you also saying that feasibility in a way is more instantaneous for revenue generation, as in whatever the clients would see live, there would be value that they will get, whereas this is more drawn out over time?
Yeah. So from a strategic level, one, the revenue cycle is very, very short, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to wait for the trial to be completed. You just have to think about the trial and ask for the data from a hospital, and just that exchange alone between hospital and sponsor is a revenue generating exchange. So that's the first thing. The second thing from a strategic level is that we could, I think of it actually as an opportunity to force, because of the marketplace, to force all cancer clinical trials to come via the OncoShot system, because the feasibility process is right at the top before any trial gets started. And if you are already getting all participants within the ecosystem on OncoShot, because they are participating for feasibility, where there's data exchange happening on the system, it lends itself for an opportunity for us to deliver more value to the entire life cycle process of a clinical trial over time. And this is actually strategically easier than going after each sponsor one at a time to participate with the hospitals on a screening and enrollment basis. So I think the feasibility marketplace lends itself to also deeper strategic positioning for other solutions over time.
Okay, shall we start?
I just have to add one small feedback before we start. That one feedback that I can have already is that we may have to keep in mind as we go ahead that though the direction I agree with, it makes complete sense. But also keep in mind that the percentage of feasibility budget allotment as compared to the entire trial budget allotment vis-a-vis the enrollment budget allotment will be quite less. So significantly less. So we may need to be mindful of that.
No, I think one of the things to also think about this is you are comparing feasibility. So there's something that may potentially very innovative, and I think this is something that we need to talk about over time as well. Okay. What you are referring to in terms of feasibility is based on a very legacy system of not actually leveraging on real-time data, right? It's usually based on legacy performance of trial sites and reputation of trial sites alone.
Yes.
And this lends itself to very little inefficiency in this entire ecosystem and the way trials are conducted. But where we can say that our feasibility model allows for much higher quality of trials is from the fact that on this system, feasibility is actually done with actual or near real-time patient data, which is transformed into far more valuable insights. So if you start off by thinking that, oh, this can only proceed in terms of, a slice of the feasibility revenue, budget within the entire trial budget, I think then we can't, there's no opportunity to move. But if you think of it as this is an entirely new model for feasibility, where tomorrow the success rates can be much higher, and the ability to introduce trials to a trial site, and the ability for sponsors to complete trials better because of the quality of the data is much higher, then I think even the pricing model becomes a very different kind of discussion. So I think that's something that we also need to be thinking out of the box. If you think about that, the standard budget, that's a good starting point, but I don't think that's the way that it will evolve over time as well.
So we'll need to have some scope for educating the clients about this, and also demonstrate one or two success cases where they see the benefit from that.
So let's go through the thing first, and then we can actually let's just have a visualization of how it works.
Okay.
So actually, as everyone knows, OncoShot now works only with existing trials. So the trial should have a record in clinicaltrials.gov, and then we can work with that. So to do a feasibility request, a user of OncoShot from the CRO pharma site needs to create trial proposal or draft of a trial. So this screen for Roche, for example, shows that Roche at the moment has 3 clinical trials, and there is a button, same as patients have, there is a button create new patient, and here there is a button new trial proposal. So if I click, there is a form. Doesn't really matter at the moment what exactly the values and fields in this form, but the essence of it is to create a trial. So it's supposed to have all the information about the proposed trial, including inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, and etc., etc., etc. So it doesn't really matter how exactly it looks like, but the idea is that the user decides to see what opportunities there are for a particular trial and creates a non-existent trial, proposes a trial. So then I click here. And at this moment, Roche, as a subscription user, will be able to see how many matching patients there are in OncoShot for this trial proposal. So trial, that's a weird index or identifier of a trial, Roche, and then total OncoShot, let's say, have 10,000 patients, and 500 of these patients are matching to this trial. And then on this screen, it's not shown, but that's because designer just didn't have enough time to complete the screen. But the idea is that Roche will see breakdown of these matching patients to this non-existing yet trial by different criteria, such as matching score, age, cancer diagnosis, blah, blah, blah. So Roche will be able to see aggregated general information without disclosing any particular information for any trial site or individual patient, like bird's eye view on these 500 patients who are matching to this trial. And then there will be trial sites list showing, or maybe not showing, so we don't know yet, but in this screen it shows that these 500 trials, 300 are in National Cancer Center, 150 in Tan Tock Seng, and 50 are in OncoShot Public. OncoShot Public is a special container for independent patients, caregivers who create profile at OncoShot independently. But it could be anything else. So it could be, for example, NUH, despite NUH, let's say, doesn't have any matching patients, Roche still can send a request to a trial site, so-called feasibility request. And this is something new, so two new things. First thing is a relatively easy one is a sponsor may create trial draft or trial proposal. That's the first thing, and see some general information about how OncoShot patients match to this trial. The second thing is that when trial sponsor decides, they can send a request to any trial site regarding this trial proposal. So for example, here in this mockup, there is a button, send request to National Cancer Center. So I click, and now it shows a very simple pop-up, but it will change. Yeah, so it's very, very rough screens, so don't think it's a final version or even nearly final version. So here it will be a feasibility questionnaire from Roche regarding trial proposal ROCCT12 to National Cancer Center. So here will be something like a questionnaire with the questions such as, do you follow good practice or whatever else. Yeah, so it could be a form, it could be upload supporting documents or whatever. Yeah, and then when trial sponsor clicks on the button, this questionnaire electronically sent to National Cancer Center. So I click here. I have to do some. Okay, so I type in maybe some notes, then I click. I upload a document. I click, then Roche is shown a pop-up that feasibility request regarding this new trial proposal sent to NCC. The next screen, how to move to the next screen? Okay, so when feasibility request is sent, NCC user receives an email that Roche would like you to review trial feasibility, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so again, designer didn't do a lot here, but the idea is that NCC user on OncoShot receives notification via email, let's say, and then gets the screen. So at this point, the information about trial proposal is shared with NCC because they to do assessment, feasibility assessment, they need to know the details about the trial. And then NCC sees how their own 300 patients match to this particular trial. So this is something no one else sees except NCC. So they can see matching score, they can see country, blah, blah, blah. So this is different compared to what Roche saw on previous screen, because Roche saw 500 and they saw general information about all matching patients, but NCC sees how their own patients match to this trial. It's not shown here again, but they will fill in the questionnaire. There will be like this chat or communication center, so they can discuss the detail. I mean, trial sponsor who sent the feasibility request and trial site who fills in the feasibility request. They can discuss details, blah, blah, blah. And eventually, the outcome of this interaction is that trial site decides that they can sign off and send back the feasibility request with populated questionnaire and with this information. So Roche, in return from the trial site, receives the information about the patients matching to this trial and some additional information. So
I think one of the additional informations that we didn't show would be things like, so different trial sites have different capabilities to run trials. You know, their certification, qualifications, staff, all those details will somehow be also within this system because it needs to get into the feasibility document. So it's not just the patient data or the insights, but the rest of the remaining bits of information that requires the feasibility to be complete.
Yeah. So, and actually that's all. That's the end of the cycle. So 3 steps. So the first step is trial sponsor or CRO create trial proposal. And at this stage, they, as a subscriber of OncoShop, they can see the general information about total numbers, matching patients to this particular trial, proposed trial. Then they can send feasibility request regarding this proposed trial to any trial site. Trial site sees their own population of patient, how they match to proposed trial. They populate, fill in the questionnaire, the feasibility assessment, whatever they can communicate, etc., etc. And when everything is ready, somehow it's signed off, and the information is shared back with trial sponsor.
So there'll be probably 2 more analytics features that will have to go into our feasibility tool. The first is, what we call analysis of competitive trials. So this happens at the level of each trial site. So for example, Roche wants to start a trial for liver cancer. That hospital may be doing maybe another 2 or 3 more trials, of which there is an overlap with the patient profile. And so this would typically be considered a competing trial in that sense. So it's not just these 300 patients who will get into the Roche trial, but actually the 300 patients are going to be spread across 3 trials. So that's one part of the analytics that no one actually has a sense of today, and that is something that we can generate over time. The second part of the analytics is also an estimated time frame of enrollment, which also is another type of analytics that we can build on. May not be available at the start, but as we understand how patients are enrolling into various trials over time, this is the kind of analytics that can be built into this feasibility product. So essentially, at some point in the near future, when a pharma wants to start at a hospital, they would know who are the patients that are ready, what are the estimates for the time to screening and enrollment for a trial, and we would have factored in some issues such as the competitive landscape within a trial site into those analytics as well. So that's something that makes this feasibility marketplace a lot more robust and unique from what is actually available in the market today.
So the idea is for one side of the marketplace, which is trial sponsor or CRO, is to support decision on the trial sites with the real-time information, with the precise information. For the trial site is to get more trials because they can plan better, and both sides get transparency on this process, which is legacy paperwork replaced with digital solution with leveraged on precise data about matching patients.
So this in a way kind of builds onto what we already have in the OncoShot solution. So if we kind of envision that we can get a hospital on board to just put in data and run, matching analytics, this is actually one level higher, where not just do they run analytics and enroll patients within their center, but they can actually look at the system to provide them access to new trials based on the same data that they're already entering.
Just ask, do the hospitals enter the data themselves into our system?
Yeah, so we allow for different methods of data entry, but even if they might be doing it manually, so in some cases in NCC, a tumor board, a research coordinator is entering that data. We also have the ability to get data dumps. That means they get the data in a file and then they send it to us at one go. But the idea is that in a few months' time, we want to establish data pipelines where this data is actually almost close to real time, right? Where it is irrespective of whether one person is working today or is on leave, that data about the hospital patients will come to the system. And that actually requires what we call the incentivization model, right? How do you make sure that the hospitals see the benefit of putting their data in the system to the point where they're ready to invest hundreds of thousands, if not small millions of dollars into building those data pipelines. And that's where it's the deeper part of the discussion, which is what is the revenue mechanism and what is the incentivization model, where potentially the sponsors can pay the trial sites a significant amount for the feasibility solution, or for each report that is generated, for example.
So, Ruslan, congratulations. I think this is a very good effort already. Really, I think it simplifies the process from the point of view and the CRO and pharma company a lot. So, and there is some feedback that I would like to share. Can I share my screen and do it there was a document that I had done on the feasibility process a few days back. There are some points from there that I can share to add to this.
Yeah, please do. It was sharing for a while. We saw some PDF, but now it stopped.
Okay. That was the wrong one. So
now we can see it again. Yeah.
So one thing I agree with what you guys are saying completely, that it will be a one-time effort from Onco Center and to enter the majority patient data, and then after that it will be kind of a top-up of the new patient data. And once that is done, then that service is available for all the new trials coming in for all the pharma and CRO clients, and that is fantastic value for the Onco Center as well as for us. For one-time effort that goes in for developing the patient database for all the cancer centers and then topping up with new data. In exchange for that, we will get revenue from. So, for example, today we do it for Roche, but tomorrow Pfizer comes up with another similar trial, then we have the same data that they can use for feasibility. So there I agree that the value is fantastic for us. Once this is properly in place, fine-tuned with a few pharma and CRO clients, customized, then the value for us is very good. The one feedback that came to my mind was that this will be a one-time revenue in the clinical trial cycle, as probably you guys are aware already. So it's not going to be an ongoing subscription thing. So it will be for one clinical trial, they will do feasibility only once. And once they select the trial center, that's the only point where we will be able to ask them for revenues. Unless they have, say, 8 or 10 trials spread out over 6 months or 1 year, for which they are willing to have subscription. But if they are doing it for one trial, as against for for clinical trial matching services, it will be a slightly ongoing work for us, but also ongoing revenue. Here it will be one-time service and one-time revenue for us. So for one trial of Roche, they will log into our platform. They will see, okay, these are the currently available trials and patients. We will likely send the questionnaire to these 3 or 4 centers, and depending on that, we will do our site selection, and that is the end of it. So we will be asking them for revenue only for that 1 point service. But that, I think, is a good entry level. As Yuren was highlighting, it's a good entry level strategy for us to enter into the pharma and CRO domain. Once we have made some inroads and made some routes and proven our value, then we can add on more and more services later on. That point of view, I think it makes perfect sense. From the document, 3 points that I wanted to highlight. The first, I think Yuren already mentioned, which was the competitive trials, but for which I think we will, as I was discussing with both of you in our past discussion, that the value comes from volume. So competitive analytics comes into picture when we have more than one pharma clients connecting with us and multiple onco centers connecting with us. So that is when we really can leverage on the competitive analytics value. But that's something, like you are saying, we will add on as we go ahead. That is the first point, to have more pharma CRO clients that would be potentially competing for the cancer patient population coming from various onco centers. Once we have that volume of pharma and CRO clients and the onco centers, then we have the real value of the competitive analysis. The second point is about adding on the genetic profiling.
Sorry, can I just raise one point before you go to point number 2? I actually agree with your competitive analysis, but I think fundamentally there are 2 levels of competitive analysis. One is actually on a macro level, which you described, competition across multiple trial sites. But there's also competition within a trial site that actually pharma never knows. And it's actually, in my opinion, one of the biggest factors behind why, even if there are 300 patients for a particular trial, it may not be enrolling on time, because those 300 patients internally within a trial site are being spread out across multiple trials. For example, phase 1 trials, you could have 10 trials, and these 10 trials are tumor agnostic to the type of cancer. They don't just need a specific diagnosis, and many different cancer profiles can fit. And these things actually impact enrollment, which no one really understands. So I think at the level of competitive analysis, if we are the only ones who have this kind of insight, it really takes the game to a completely different level, not just at macro, but we can even show competitive analysis in micro. I mean, the question is really how happy the hospitals would be, to do that. But, we may not need to show the farmer that, there are 4 competing trials, but this information can be incorporated within the so-called estimated time to trial enrollment completion, for example. So there are different ways to actually present that information, but competition happens in 2 levels. Just something to bear in mind also.
Yeah, I agree with you. From that point of view, I think adding to the metric where we have said 500 out of 10,000 matching patients, we'll also have to add something like number of patients already being screened or already being enrolled or something like that, to add to that, because it's not only the matching patients. Maybe out of 500, 499 are already being enrolled by Pfizer, so then it doesn't make sense. So that sub classification we'll have to keep on adding. But I think you already have that in your vision from where you are coming. The second point, did you get that, Ruslan? What you?
Yeah. You told about that before, and actually it was really nice to see that this idea was used in this feasibility workflow, whatever we call it.
Another point is that maybe, Uren, when you are discussing this with Roche or Novartis, you can also, or if you are also discussing it with some CRO, you can also get an idea of what they are using, because from my experience, CROs don't have something as beautiful a tool as we are presenting, but they have something at a lower level that they are using as a digital solution for feasibility already. So they don't have this kind of live presentation of real live data, but they have something, even the legacy data is presented in some kind of a digital solution. So it will not be only paperwork and legacy versus our solution. So it will be some form of digital solution based on legacy versus our digital solution. So what value we add will also determine how much revenue we can charge. So we'll have to also get some market research about what is the digital solution that CROs are already offering to pharma companies, and then come to our revenue model. Maybe when you are discussing this, or I can also do that with some of my contacts, we can find out what are the kind of digital solutions today that the clients are using already vis-a-vis, or you have that information already from your interview so
We
far.
do have some of the products. We know the key competitor landscape, but I think the question would be what's actually being used, at least in our target markets, right? Because a lot of them seem to be more focused in the US and Europe. And I think what's not very clear is really the scale of adoption. Um, so I think when we are working with Roche, for example, and some of the CROs, we will need to kind of get deeper into existing solutions that they might be using and what we are already providing as a value add, and to make sure that we can provide in 10x more value than the existing solution to justify a potential switch. And so that's something to bear in mind.
Nilesh,
Yeah.
I presume you are very familiar with this feasibility process from your past experience.
Yes.
Okay.
This was one of the first, so around 15, 20 years back when I started my career, this is the first thing that any clinical professional is expected to do. So that is where I started, and then it's really a the most low level activity for any clinical trial professional.
Okay, that's great, because what we need next, so what I showed just now, it's a very rough workflow for this feasibility product. So we need to identify how it should look like exactly, what's the value, something like wrap it nicely, and then create an explicit specification what exactly needs to be done from the technical perspective, how will it fit into CRO and pharma existing operating procedures, and how will it fit to trial site. And as I understand, Huren very well aware about the trial side, but if you could help with the other part, the other party, CRO and trial sponsor, then eventually we can get a very refined product which everyone will want and ready to purchase.
Sure. Yeah, I think we already have a ongoing dialogue between the three of us. I will do some homework from my side, and I'll set up some sessions where we can continue that dialogue for this focused on the feasibility topic per se. I will come up with some customizations that I can think of from the point of view of pharma and CRO clients. Two already I have, as I'm trying to show here. One is that Uren has worked a lot on including the genetic service providers in our ecosystem, and including genetic profiling data from our patients. I don't know if we are already collecting that from our patient pool from our onco centers, but if we are, then provide that separately to the pharma and CRO clients during the feasibility will be a huge value add for us. That is something that the CROs, I don't think, are being explicitly able to provide today. From regulatory point of view, it is a very big requirement, that if a pharma client can clearly see transparently that, okay, these are the genetic profile matches with my drug in this particular geographical area in these centers, and I can target that in addition to the inclusion exclusion criteria. That will be a big value add. The third point, how we can do that, I think we'll have to discuss more, Ruslan. I also don't have any idea, but maybe Uren has some idea. And the third point, which I already had mentioned earlier, is to add some kind of geographical map visual perspective, as you can see in what I'm sharing. So maybe as we go ahead, that maybe this at a global level is still far off for us, but even at a regional level, where you just now showed a list of 3 onco centers, instead of that, if we can have a visual way of showing that, okay, these are the total matching patient populations, and of these, as the client goes ahead, then we show that out of these different zones or these different centers, this is where the trial, where the client conducted its site selection process for so out of these centers where this shows the patient matching patient population. The next screen would show the places where the site selection exercise or the feasibility exercise was done. The screen after that would show exactly the sites that are potentially selected by the client on basis of our tool, and kind of a list of those trial centers, and then also a backup. So suppose, because feasibility exercise is not foolproof, there are many variables that come into picture as the process goes ahead. So out of those 3 or 4 that the client engages with, maybe 1 or 2 might succeed. But we also need to provide a backup list of trial sites that, okay, if 1 or 2 fail, then there are other trial sites that you can conduct the feasibility exercise in as you go ahead. So this visual representation, in my opinion, is also something that is missing in the tools currently available. And though it represents the data that we have, just in a more, just the same data is represented, but it is represented in a more customer friendly, user friendly, and visually attractive manner, and that is what sells. I'm sure Ruslan must be aware of this, that most digital IT tools that are available, they try to make their platform as user friendly, customer friendly, and visually attractive as possible. So this can be one feature that we can think of whether we can add as we go ahead.
So just to respond to your 2 points. So great point on the second one, and the genomic part is certainly something that we are very mindful about. So we can actually do so that. I think when we are talking about feasibility up to this point in time, it already involves mutational information, right? So that's something that it's actually an important part of our feasibility product, because we are already collecting gene level information, but that's where we have to grow with the quality of genomic information, so that the feasibility request will go beyond just what is the gene. It's going to look at specific mutations, where exactly the mutations are, what type of mutations they are, and eventually that's going to be something that is truly very different on our platform compared to anyone else. One thing that is also worth thinking about, and you should probably think about this and sleep over it as well, is the possibility of whether genomic service providers could use our platform as a service to sell or share their data, to monetize their data. So genomic service providers, by nature of the work that they do, run a lot of molecular tests, and they will have all that data as well. they could actually monetize their data by putting it on OncoShot for query by sponsors as well. We didn't think about that too deeply. Today, the customer side, is the sponsors, which is really pharma, CRO, and small biotech. But could genomic service providers also be a big and powerful customer that could leverage on our platform over time? So that's also something to consider. Yeah, anything to say about that?
I must be honest with you, Uren, that I have a lot of experience with pharmas, CROs, and all other sectors of our client market. But genetic service providers is one industry sector that I don't have personally. I have never worked in. I know by hearsay and by second-hand information what is their business model, but I don't have first-hand information of working in a genetic service provider, which you have, I think. You have interacted with them in your past projects. So.
Because they're part of our ecosystem anyway. We've got about almost four of the biggest genomic test providers in the region that are based in Singapore now.
So what is the revenue model exactly currently?
So it's very simple. It's a very linear revenue model. They sell a test to the oncologist. They make money out of that test. They accumulate a database, but today it's not very clear how much they are monetizing this database of genomic profiles to CROs, for example. So this is something that we could ask them slowly as well.
Yeah, if it is that linear, then definitely it becomes a huge benefit for the genetic service providers as well as for us, which can be a separate revenue generation model for us in addition to pharma CRO clients, and we can start marketing right from the beginning as a separate revenue generation model. Start separating that out as a value added service for which we can ask the pharma companies also to pay separately and the genetic service providers to pay separately. That okay, you might do your routine feasibility. In addition, if you want genomic profiling also done for your patient population, we can have this also provided to you, and we will charge slightly extra for that. No, so which is a very big regulatory requirement.
I don't mean it that way. I mean that
also from the genetic service provider point of view, but also from the pharma CRO point of view as well. It will be a very big help, I think.
Yeah, no, when I think about the genomic service providers on the feasibility marketplace, I was just referring to them as they wanting to sell their population level genomic data to sponsors who are looking to start trials. So it kind of is a issue because the patients, however, are dispersed across multiple care providers. But nevertheless, it is potentially an additional pool of patients who could be accessing clinical trials. We don't know.
We may also have to look at the legal angle for that. Don't know if there is any legal angle connected with sharing patient genetic data with pharma and CRO clients.
So the entire mechanism of this is anonymized data anyway. But yes, there's still a legal component that we need to explore. I think so. The last one, visualization, is a good point. I think the Singapore one at least will not be very complicated. 3 dots in a small rectangle of sorts. But I think India is another complicated thing altogether when you're talking about feasibility. But hopefully within the first 3 months, the goal is that you can have a first product and pilot it in Singapore quickly, then we are good. The difference in Singapore is that I'm in discussions with the Ministry of Health and the 3 hospitals, and we might actually be able to accelerate commercial discussion across 3 hospitals and MOH very quickly. And by doing that, we could force all cancer clinical trial feasibility to happen via our platform. So I think from a go-to-market perspective, to me, that is the key part, you see, where I don't need to spend a lot of effort searching for hospitals at one end and then going to individual pharma or biotech at the other end. What we can do is we can just get all the hospitals to be on the system very quickly, and they will require every feasibility request to come via OncoShot. So that's what we are trying to do at this point.
I think I agree with you that that for Singapore, the geographical visualization is simple, but for me, the visual representation is just the starting point. So, as you were referring to macro and micro level here also, so for example, we have three centers, but we can have visual representations cancer type wise tomorrow, or different parameters. So, for example, if Roche is conducting trials in NSCLC, metastatic melanoma, hepatic cancer, etc. So then they would want to have visual representations of not just 500 patients total matching the trial population, but how many of them are NSCA for their NSCLC trial, a separate match, for their liver carcinoma trials, a separate match. So visual representation separated out by cancer type, or we can also think of other parameters tomorrow, for separating out the visual representations which can add. So adding the visual angle really adds value from client's perspective, I think, because there are some people who are more data oriented. There are most people who are visual oriented from a client point of view. So even when a client goes to sell that to their higher management, if it is more visually attractive and really on very gross terms, beautiful looking, it sells better. It makes our case easier for them to sell.
Let's maybe very quickly discuss the risks and obstacles. Yeah. So Nilesh, what do you think? Will it be a big obstacle if a CRO or a pharma company, let's say they have their own feasibility process for all trials? There would be an obstacle if for cancer clinical trials, they will need to deviate from their standard operating procedures or whatever, what they get used to do, and do it in a different way. So what do you think?
I don't think the deviation. So for clinical trial matching services, yes, that is a criteria. But for feasibility processes, I don't estimate that to be a issue. There can be a different issue which Uren had brought up in our last discussion, which is oncologist loyalty. Apart from legacy data, most feasibilities go on basis of. So, for example, if Uren is the medical director of Roche, and he has personal relationships with 4 oncologists in National Cancer Center, 2 in other cancer centers. Then, by habit, he would want to just capitalize on those relationships and keep on repeating trials to those oncologists again and again, just because of their personal or professional rapport. Because there are many other business angles that are connected, a give and take relationship over years that is generated between the pharma contact person and those oncologists. Trial feasibility is just one point, but after that, attending workshops, attending scientific sessions, etc., etc. So many other things are connected with that, of which the feasibility is a small part, a small factor. So we will have to look at that. Do you understand what I say? It's a different angle as compared to the tool. No, I'll explain again, or maybe Uren can explain. Okay.
So it's basically saying that sometimes the entire decision making is not based on data.
Okay, yeah.
It's just based on relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess I think the general way of how we are evolving in terms of a data-driven society is that eventually those who keep on that will fall by the wayside, because the benefits of following a data-driven system would actually far outweigh over the course of time. So yeah, I guess we'll just have to deal with those scenarios as we come along to it.
Yeah. Just to list out the potential risks, since he asked me, Ruslan, so I just wanted to mention that as a more valid risk in this situation instead of SOP-driven processes. So oncologist relationships might be a valid risk for us to consider and then overcome eventually. Processes, I think what we are showing right now, even in our process, we can see that it is only a 3-step process and it is pretty simple and straightforward. What would require more detailing is the questionnaire. when we are sending the questionnaire, how robust, and because this is just the capsule or the capsule of the feasibility that we are doing. The real feasibility happens, the medicine of the feasibility is in the questionnaire, what the trial site or the oncologist will answer, what answers will come in the questionnaire, and that how strong and robust that questionnaire is. That so as if you remember, there are many questionnaires that I had shared by email. I can share them again. So how we design that questionnaire, because I presume that that will also be designed by us, right? Or are we going to take it as such from the client?
What do you think? Will it be possible? How realistic is to standardize the questionnaire and trial proposal? Because as
So
far
more,
as we discussed with Huran, each pharma and each trial site, something like there are many different ways, and usually it's a PDF which needs to be filled in paper in a sense, and all of them are different.
They are similar. There might be slight differences here.
so for sure we'll need customization for each clinical trial. But the more work we take on, the more revenue we stand to gain, you know. So if we take on even a bit of designing of that questionnaire based on their PDF questionnaire, if we say that we'll also devise a digital questionnaire for you that the oncologist can answer instead of a PDF questionnaire, that we'll have a digital questionnaire where the oncologist can enter data online. Many of them might be yes or no questions. So for example, do you follow ICH guidelines? Yes or no? Do you have the sufficient number of patients? Yes or no? There is a comment section where they'll have to enter text data, but many of them might be either yes or no or multiple choice questions. So that if we can design, I don't know, that's for your
I
call
think
to take.
Neil, when we discuss further, one of the things that I would like you to help us get deep into, right, is, for example, some of these components. In my mind, there's also not just at the trial level, but there's a trial site set of data that kind of needs to be captured as a trial site profile, and maybe potentially as an investigator kind of profile that might be required. So I didn't want to build everything at the start first, but the question is to see what is the full scope of this effort, and then which parts of it to capture in the first 3 months and which parts to build over time. But you would realize that in the feasibility document, it's not just at the level of the patient eligibility, is the readiness of the trial site to conduct the trial, and then some details also at the level of the PI,
Yes.
which we are now assuming is not very critical for the feasibility marketplace. But having that within the system may actually be very transformative over time, as well as additional value-added features to make it a complete or robust solution in a sense. So I think that's probably some of the stuff that we need to discuss over about.
So what's the general plan? So we want to start driving users and then deliver the product.
Yeah, so the plan is that tentatively, and I'll probably do a broad timeline that everyone can refer to. I see that at the end of the next 3 months, we would have a marketplace that is ready. I don't know whether I'm really pushing it, but I'm setting myself a target where I have 3 hospitals and 1 Ministry of Health ready with at least 1 set of data to come into the system. And at launch at the end of 3 months, we will also have at least 1 pharma partner testing out the system and paying for the use of this.
So to achieve it, we need to decide explicitly what's the product,
Yeah.
what's the product market fit,
Mm-hmm.
then deliver somehow the product, so it's unrealistic to get everything in 3 months, but the core system, I think it's we can do that. Then we need to pump the data in. So it's all very tight schedule next 3 months.
I think the data will come in bits and pieces. You would assume that go live we would at least have one set of data, which is 1,000 patients from NCC.
Mhm.
So even that can be fine.
Yeah.
When I say the 3 hospitals, it means we should have signed an agreement with them.
Yeah.
From my
And
point of view, what I would need is so regular meetings arranged between us, because I'll need to understand what is happening so that I will be able to contribute live
yeah,
on the designing of the. We may need to have 1 or 2 meetings per week. And second, what I will need to do separately, independently, is try to find out if Urine doesn't have already information about what is the current digital solution that, if we say Roche or Novartis, that they are using. And because we need to have a very clear, when we are saying that at the end of 3 months we want them to sign up for monetization, then we'll need to have some idea of what kind of value we'll be able to give them vis-a-vis the digital solution that they are using today. You know,
yeah.
for
So
which
I can share that what I've done is that NCC and Roche will actually be involved with us very closely as we also build the product. So we have in principle agreement from Roche that they will participate as the first partner in the marketplace. They kind of know what kind of subscription model we are working towards on a monthly basis. And they are happy to actually get dirty with us to see how the product design should also evolve. So I think we won't be developing the product on our own. It will be together with NCC at the hospital side for their workflows to make sure that fits the hospital workflow. And then from the pharma side, it will be with Roche as the first strategic partner for the sponsors workflow. So we can certainly ask them those questions. What are they using? They mentioned that some part of they mentioned 1 or 2 tools, but certainly those tools are not used like how we envisioned it. So even for them, it was quite obvious that, yeah, we might use some tools, but doesn't matter. We can still do this. It makes sense to us as well. But we can get into the details of it as we start engaging them.
Okay, makes sense.
So that's probably all for today. Yeah, so the idea of this meeting was broad view of our plans. Yeah, so what we just discussed stays on top of everything. Of course, we won't abandon our other activities. Yeah, but this is the highest priority because it's very ambitious aim, but we have all the support, and in a sense, everything is in our hand, whether we can achieve it or not.
Yeah. So for the rest of the team, it's also about, as we move along with this particular delivery, how we talk to the CRO, the sponsors, the discussions will move into a product level discussion as well. So that's why it's important for Sonzo to kind of understand, for example. And then Kara, you would then immediately realize that when you're having these discussions, there needs to be sets of assets that we will quickly need to build in terms of information sheet, sales decks, pitch decks, and stuff like that. And you will need to support in that part of that delivery process and the communications process in relation to that product. So this is why I want all of you to understand how we are building. So in a nutshell, everything that is happening in OncoShot is like an evolution. The last 1 to 2 years, what we've built is really the core, which is the trial matching tool. And now what we are starting to see is that this trial matching tool is going to help us build different products. And the first product that we want to try to deliver to build a consistent and sustainable revenue model is a feasibility marketplace product, for which there are 2 groups of important users. One is the hospital and the other side is the sponsors, right? So that's the kind of gist of what we are doing. And there's going to be a lot of effort that's being spent from the development side to get to that 3-month target. And then we will concurrently to have a lot of effort in the non-development side, right? And we will have all these discussions as we move along as well. Any more questions, or is yeah? We should have one round of questions before we sign off. It's getting quite late.
I just wanted to ask that so when we have a demonstration of our product, we also be showing about the feasibility tool that we have right now?
Yes, I think we should, because we don't want to go through the.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so she's asking when we go to so we have a few meetings with CRO and pharma, and we talk to them. Do we just want to show the current product, or do we want to talk about the feasibility product?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we are having this meeting, because we shouldn't waste the opportunity to just talk about the trial matching tool, which obviously they might find it harder to see the value from, right? So that's what I want to shape everything together, so that the first instance of us engaging them, they know that we are engaging them because we're inviting them to participate in our feasibility marketplace, right? And this is how it works.
Okay.
Okay. Tara, anything?
I was just wondering about what you said about the legacy, the legacy data. So that will how exactly will the hospitals provide that to the farmer? Is it through the questionnaire?
Yeah, it's usually just some information through the questionnaire, but also sometimes farmer may have some legacy data from previous trials that they hold. But most of the time in the questionnaire, if the hospital is filling it up, it's just most of them cooking up some numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Ruhi, anything you want to ask? You may not see the immediate relevance, but I assure you that there will be some relevance at some point. Okay. Ian, anything?
Hello?
Yeah, Ian, any questions?
Yeah, not really.
Okay.
Sorry, just one last question, Huron. When will we finalize all the nuts and bolts of the product so that I can start on the comms?
Yeah, so that's a very good question.
You can
can't.
start now. Yeah, at least something like drafting something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the visuals, right? The best way to interpret it is that it will never be complete. It's a moving piece of work.
Yes.
So I think why I'm quite happy and excited is the fact that we actually have working visuals that we can plonk into our whatever marketing or sales assets that we're trying to build already. We don't have to wait. These wireframes are very powerful in that sense. So we should kind of leverage them, because at the end of the day, they will know that this is going to be delivered at a certain time. But the visuals that we have are already selling points. This is what the product can do. This is how it will work. Yeah. The nuances and the finer details is different. That will be separate, but it's good enough.
Okay. I'll work on it.
Yeah, so next we need to identify what areas we need to work on. So for example, comms, ops, path to market, product market fit, whatever, and then spread among us who is doing what and how we can collaborate and what we discuss and etc.
So I think we should have a follow-up discussion.
Yeah.
Shall we do that tomorrow?
I'm fine. Yeah, with whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, but maybe not tomorrow.
Wednesday afternoon? Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, for me it's fine. Tomorrow is also fine. Yeah, but we need to structure it first between you and me and probably.
Let's do this. Maybe tomorrow we will have a phone call between myself, you, and Nilesh, just from a product level.
Yeah.
And then we can do the team in Singapore can come together, and Nilesh, you can join us remotely. If Ruhi, maybe if it doesn't, immediately doesn't involve you, I will spare you that meeting, so that you don't have to waste your time as well. But for the rest of the Singapore team, where from the ops and outreach perspective and from the comms perspective, we need to structure. Hopefully, after our meeting tomorrow, we can have a better idea.
Yeah.
And then we do something on Wednesday PM.
Yeah. So let's meet physically in the office.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then let's brainstorm and map out everything what needs to be done.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Have a good evening. Bye bye, guys.
What's left of the evening? Yeah.
And Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.